when it comes to Garcilaso de la Vega, I'm not sure there's anyone who so paradigmatically captures the default Renaissance position of suspension between the poles of ambition for the ideal and the disappointing gravity of reality, the mundane and the celestial. It's a recurrent theme throughout the Renaissance, and Garcilaso de la Vega really makes that his own. The painful position, the suspenseful, the agonizing, the torturous position of grasping something perfect, but it being unattainable. You are always held down by your corporeal reality, by your imperfections. And the way this feeds into Catholicism for him is, and that Catholicism feeds into it, is great fodder for debate. But putting aside that, you get a really spectacular group of sonnets primarily. He wrote in many different forms, and he is recognized as one of the great artists of Spain of the Renaissance, if not the greatest Renaissance artist in writing, literature. But he is he's a master. It's very clear to see. The first of his sonnets we have here: when I stand and contemplate my state and look back at the path that brought me here, I find, in the light of how I lost my way, I might have met a much more bitter fate. If I ignore my steps along that road, then I know not just how I came to grief. I know my life is over, and I rue the passing of my sorrow when I die. I shall meet my end, for I gave my heart to one who could destroy and ruin me if she should wish, and she could learn to wish. For if my will can bring about my death, hers, less partial to my cause, will kill me if it can, and why should it refrain? Curious. Interesting to dig in. First of all, a couple of things jump out when I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes poetry, when you first come up, it's just a jumble of words, and you're not sure what's going on. So you got to jump in and start to just see something and pick it up and look at it and see, does that really, what is this? Why is it like this? Why would that phrase, that word, that punctuation point, why? And the first thing that jumps out to me is that first line: when I stand and contemplate my state. Contemplate my state. Let me get my pen. Contemplate my state is a sense of self-introspection, self-critique, self-involvement that was really rather new at the period of the Renaissance. The Middle Ages was much more oriented in art towards, well, human beings are nothing, so why look within? Let's just look up. There was undercurrents leading in opposition to that, but that was prevailing. And now in the Renaissance, we have an emphasis on self-examination, introspection, a kind of the value of looking inward. You can almost see an older age wanting to smack them and saying, what are you daydreaming? You're always thinking about yourself. Why are you so self-involved? Come on, snap out of it. Do something in the world. And the position of the Renaissance at this point is like, well, no, there's some value in just, examining my own thoughts, my own feelings. And he develops this: when I stand and contemplate my state and look back at the path that brought me here. And right there, at the path ding, ding, dings for me. And same with that next line, I find in light of how I lost my way. And right here, we should be, Dante. Lost my path in a lonely woods. That's Dante. And his seeding of the Renaissance just keeps going, century after century. Everybody comes back to him. I find, in light of how I lost my way, I might have met a much more bitter fate, which sounds almost vulnerable, granting of perhaps the will of Providence, but also the sense that there is, perhaps just dumb luck, fortune, Lady Fortune. The world is a very dangerous place, and he's suddenly evaluating that, well, okay, it could have been worse. There are dangers out there in the world, and I have perhaps escaped a few of them. I'm not going to say that my life is terrific, but it could have been worse, because I've seen people die. He is a soldier, and he would have seen people die. If I ignore my steps along that road, then I know not just how I came to grief, I know my life is over, and I rue the passing of my sorrow when I die. Sense of great fatalism there. I rue the passing of my sorrow when I die. Why would you, to regret is to rue. Why would you regret the passing of your sorrow? Well, maybe because your sorrow is something that's very special to you, something that is a very interior judgment, something that has a sense of introspection to it, but it's yours. And maybe it's the only thing you have that you can hold on to of something that you remember, something that was special to you that perhaps you have lost. You lose that sorrow even. When you die, and the sense of the mystery of death, the impending inevitability of death, the fate of death is hanging over this, and you see someone grappling with what does it mean. It's scared. This is a scared voice. This is somewhat terrified. I shall meet my end, for I gave my heart to one who could destroy and ruin me if she should wish. And here we have she. And again, that sense of if she should wish, that sense of, very vulnerable to kind of a whim of somebody else. Suddenly, it's not just fate, fortune, God who has this power to destroy, but also this mysterious she, where we have an import from the Middle Ages, essentially, where women became a vision of an ideal, a venue for grace in this world that could just as easily be something torturous, something cruel, a venue for cruel twists of fate and the inability to partake in blessedness. I shall meet my end, for I gave my heart to one who should destroy and ruin me. Very fatalistic. If she should wish, and she could learn to wish. So that is really like dwelling on that and getting that sense of that's not just a little bit of risk, but she might say that I can live, or that whatever, she's not going to destroy me today, but tomorrow is a different thing, and everything is always so vulnerable. For if my will can bring about my death, hers, less partial to my cause, will kill me if it can, and why should it refrain? He is a victim of this kind of idealization. He has idealized this woman, this she, as a kind of divine figure, as somebody who is unattainable in that godlike role. but also somebody who could be very cruel, very destructive, a very, a Genesis god who can wipe people out just, on a whim. You get a sense of this great victimization, this great vulnerability. Again, this suspension between grasping the ideal and feeling the weight of your own imperfections. It's really powerful when you get that sense of vulnerability. Now, in the original Spanish, you get a great sense of the mastery of the sonnet form, because on the one hand, he is doing this, Garcilaso de la Vega is doing this very much in a Petrarchan sonnet form. He's very influenced by Petrarch. We saw a little Dante. Petrarch is here too. Petrarch is doing the octet, sestet sonnet form, and he is keeping that up here, but with a very intricate rhyme scheme. He sticks in the beginning, cuando me para a contemplar mi estado y a ver los pasos por do me ha traído al ayo, según por do anduve perdido, que a mayor mal pudiera haber llegado. Sorry for my pronunciation. Spanish is not my thing. But you can see ABBA in that first rhyme scheme. That's the pattern. And ABBA in that second stanza as well. So those first 8 lines hold to that very solid ABBA rhyme scheme. And it's very regular. It's very disciplined. You get that sense of the rhythm of the line, and that simple organization of the rhyme. And then when you get down to the bottom, arte acabarme quiero, matarme parte aseyo. That's where the rhyme goes a little haywire. It's CDE DAE. It's not a pattern at that point. It's just it's a very intricate reworking and summation, or a variation on the pattern that was set before. And you get a sense of this great discipline in managing this. And here, Garcilaso seems to be, in my book, channeling not just Dante and Petrarch, but also Castiglione, who coined the great term, and probably my favorite term in any language, my favorite word in any language, is sprezzatura, which is roughly translated as the French nonchalance, the ability to do something very difficult as if it were nothing at all. Grace. Grace under pressure in some respects, but the ability to do something with ease, even if it is very difficult. And you look at that rhyme pattern, that intricate little weaving of it, the mastery of form that he has, that Garcilaso de la Vega has imported from Italy. He's one of the first to take the Italianate lines of the early Renaissance of Petrarch and make it fit a Spanish medium. He can do that, and it seems so effortless. It seems so graceful, so simple. I can't pronounce very well, so you're not going to get that from me. But if you can find somebody who can pronounce this properly, it's really quite smooth and very graceful and absolutely cool. That's mastery. You get some of the same grace and mastery and interweavings of the Renaissance themes of again, the suspension between the ideal and the mundane in Sonnet 10. Oh, sweet mementos to my sorrow found, so dear and joyous when it was God's will, joined forever in memory and mind, together you conspire to see my death. No one could have told me in times long past, when you and you alone brought so much joy, that on a bitter day you'd come back to me, in the bleak company of so much grief. Since in 1 hour you have taken from me the joys doled out a little at a time, take from me too the sorrow left behind. If you do not, I cannot but believe you brought me joy only because you wished to see me die of memories filled with grief. Now again, we get this this sense of the the threat of the woman, the woman as a kind of divine omnipotence that is hovering as a threat over him. He feels absolutely vulnerable, absolutely victimized by this power, by this woman figure, this female who is possibly going to annihilate him. And he doesn't know. And it's the anxiety of that moment that really carries this this poem, just like in the previous one. You get the sense that he's just afraid to breathe because it's so precarious, it's so dangerous, it's so thrilling in some ways. He's living on the knife's edge here. He is experiencing a kind of divinity, even if it can at any moment kill him. And it doesn't take much to see, well, you know, the world is a very dangerous place. And and yes, there were still plagues rocketing through Europe from time to time, every few years. And he was a soldier in the royal court of Spain, and was certainly no stranger to violence. You get this sense of he knows how uncertain life is, how vulnerable all humanity is. And he's giving voice to that and exploring that little place where the confidence of always feeling the master of your domain is undercut by a great sense of vulnerability. The value of humanity demands, in the Renaissance calculation here, demands attention to the dignity of man, but the dignity of man is always dwarfed by his place in the universe, his small place in the universe. He is a great creature that is perhaps created in the image of God, but he is still absolutely subject to the powers of the universe and the twists of fate that can be so cruel. Now, significantly, again, you get this this dwelling on death. He has a Spanish morbidity throughout. The sense of fatalism and self-culpability. No one could have told me in times past. As if he'd say, I could be, you could have told me, but I wouldn't have paid attention. I'm just a mortal. And I'm flighty that way, perhaps. The focus on memory is very interesting because he's seizing on it in a kind of pre-Wordsworthian way, where just like the Romantics of the later age would use memories, particularly Wordsworth, as a way of tripping into a kind of divine reverie. It is their pathway to a kind of universal and poetic truth. Here, he is dwelling on it as dangerous again, because like the previous one, again, you have this sense of, well, he's uncertain about sorrow, he's uncertain about pain, he's afraid to give it up because that's kind of like death, but at the same time, it's killing him. So you get this suspension between, do I really want to give up my sorrow and my pain and my anxiety? Well, then I'm just going to be empty. Perhaps it is the proper place of humanity to be vulnerable like that, to experience that kind of vulnerability and humility in the presence of fate, God, the universe, the woman, all of that wrapped up in one. And again, the original Spanish is quite remarkable. Oh dulces prendas por mí mal halladas, dulces y alegres cuando Dios quería. Juntos estáis en la memoria mía y con ella en mi muerte conjuradas. Again, that's just the first stanza. I'm not going to torture you anymore, but you see the intricate rhyme scheme again. Halladas, quería, mía, conjuradas, pasadas, via, dia, representadas. And then, after the octet, after those 8 lines, it throws out the pattern and starts to get creative in its own little way. Llevastes, distes, dejastes. That is CCC. ABAB, ABBA, ABBA, CCC. Boom, boom, boom. Hammering that home. Hammering that finality home. Sonnet 23. For as long as the lily and the rose give their color and hue to your fair face, and the look in your eyes, ardent and chaste, inflames and yet restrains it too, and for as long as your hair, taken from veins of purest gold, shimmers around your throat, so beautiful, so slender, and so white, blown in disarray by the gentle breeze, oh, gather in the joy of this your spring, the sweetest fruit before a sullen time covers that gleaming mountaintop with snow. The icy wind will wither the fair rose. Fleet-footed age will change and transform all, but never alters its own ancient ways. You get this great sense of suspension between the ideal and the earthly again. The sense of passing time, another common thing, we are caught in time. The ideal, the divine, the heavens, time does not exist. For humanity, time exists, and it is relentless, and it is often quite cruel. And you get also in that first line, the twin appearances of the lily and the rose. These 2 images of flowers. The lily is really very delicate. The rose is really very passionate. So you're seeing, again, this sort of perfect and lusty, give a color and hue to your fair face, and the look in your eyes, ardent and chaste. Ardent and chaste are 2 very different impulses. So again, suspension between 2 poles, a kind of polar instinct between the ardents and the chaste, which is very reserved and very cool, and the ardent is leaning in. You get a sense of the passage of time, the cruelty of time. Youth and happiness are fleeting. You're when you're seeing, especially when they go, oh gather, it's just leading ahead to future poets. Oh gather ye rosebuds while you may, and but also the past of Carpe diem. Horace saying, seize the day. This great sense of anxiety, the will to experience the divine, the inability to leave the mundane, and at the same time, an almost masochistic urge within that. The icy wind will wither the fair rose. Fleet-footed age will change and transform all, but never alter its own ancient ways. The relentlessness of time, the inevitability of death. But in that, the challenge to it. Gather in the joy of your spring, the sweetest fruit before a sullen time covers that gleaming mountaintop with snow. Before a sullen time, before old age, and the gray hair of it, and the withering of death. That challenge to it, that ambition to seek the eternal, to pursue the ideal, to reach for it, even as it is unattainable, even as the realization of its unattainability is painful and torturous in its own way. That's what Garcilaso de la Vega does so well. And that's a line in the Renaissance that is, you can see throughout in pretty much all Renaissance art, but that he brings it into such clarity because he makes that his own. That is, oh, that's his wheelhouse. And he makes of it something very, very profound.